Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Junia Doan. Thank you for joining me today for Junia Doan's The Spark. With me is playwright and producer Ian Gadapee. Ian is the producing artistic director of the Windmill Theater. Welcome, Ian. Ian, tell us about the Windmill Theater.
So the Windmill Theater is a group of young artists. We all met at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and we have a focus on producing new works that follow in the traditions of Western theater. This means we focus on works that are written story first. I have a lot of experience as a playwright. I've been writing ever since I can remember. And one of the things that I noticed is that as a young artist, it's very difficult to get a play produced if you don't tie it to a social issue. That's what a lot of the theatrical competitions are based on. And so I started thinking, what's going to happen in 15, 20 years when all of our works are tied to current events from 15, 20 years ago? And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to give a way for young artists to hone their craft and to produce new works that were meant to endure, while also giving artists the opportunity to really showcase their ambition and use that. Because a lot of the entry points for artists are competition based. And competitions are wonderful. I love competitions, but it really doesn't separate the ambitious and the work-focused artists from those who are just blessed with a ton of talent. And there is nothing against talent, but there's also a beauty to that work ethic. And so we're pitch-based. We work with a lot of artists who come to us and say, hey, I want to do this. And we try to create projects where they can use their gifts. And we've been really blessed because we've recently ventured into physical art. With each of our shows, we now produce an art gallery. And so one artist who's worked with us, her name's Amy Scarborough. She's fantastic, one of my favorite artists who is currently producing work. She's had from each of our galleries sold at least one original painting and gotten commissions because her work is just fantastic, and it's her opportunity to venture out into that world and to start making her name. So we're just all about sponsoring new works and doing anything that we can to get these artists' voice out there.
So is it offered by Florida Atlantic University?
No, so we are not affiliated officially with Palm Beach Atlantic. We are our own independent organization. And this began when I started producing in high school back in 2019. And we've just continued it and grown it and grown it. We officially incorporated once I came to PBA, but we are our own independent organization, but we often work with students from the university and using some university facilities that they're very gracious to let us work with and to guide us.
How do you raise money or get money for the budget? Costumes, lighting, whatever.
So we're actually really, it's interesting. We're not really heavy on fundraising. Right now we're searching very desperately to find someone who is more business minded than we are, because we're a bunch of artists. We're not business practitioners. But a lot of our money comes from donors and people who have seen our work and who want to donate to help us continue producing. All of our shows, with the exception of our recent revival of The Vault, we did purely on a pay what you want, kind of like Palm Beach Shakespeare Festival does. And this allows people of all socioeconomic statuses to have access to our work. And we've had people who have been impacted by us and who believe in our mission, who are giving freely to help us continue in what we do. And a lot of our donations are also the materials that we need. So instead of people donating money so we can go buy lighting and sound equipment, we've had people donate lighting and sound equipment to us, and we use that. So yeah, we're just starting out with the financial side of things. We've had growth that I did not anticipate at all. But that side of things is more of we're letting Providence guide it for now. And as we continue to grow and we continue to expand, we're hoping to bring somebody in to help us raise a few more funds because art is not easy and it sure as heck is not cheap.
Tell us about your goals as a writer of plays, because you have really, Windmill has really offered a lot of your work.
I believe that theater is a medium that allows us to unite. Because if I believe one thing and you believe something that is completely and entirely different from what I believe, if we have both shared in the experience of seeing a story performed live, we can at least talk about that and we can recognize that we each have a face and that we're people and we can connect on a spiritual and on a soul level. And so, as a writer, it's my goal to create stories that are timeless and that are story first. So as I'm going through scripts, even some pieces that are more provocative, I don't just write comedies. But there are some plays like The Vault, for instance, where we tackled the Me Too movement and how does that affect our relationships with each other. Um, and even with a play like that, I never have moments in my play where a character directly addresses an issue that's going on in the world. We try to stay away from activist theater or didactic theater, and we just let people and characters experience the consequences as they occur. And it's really important to me to tell stories that are just stories. If you look at the mythological traditions, especially of ancient Greece, you weren't seeing this is what I believe. You're seeing I'm taking an action and this is the consequence that it bears. So we can now discuss the justice of these consequences or how that impacts us as people. And that's a tradition that I would really love to see come back, especially in the American theater.
Tell us the story of some of your plays.
So I will talk about the most recent one that we produced, which is Here We Come a Caroling. And it was a show that we were absolutely blessed to tour. It was our first fully professional production. We were able, through the gifts of our donors and our sponsors, to pay our actresses and to actually tour this all the way from West Palm Beach up to Titusville, Mims, Florida area. We visited several different venues, including jazz clubs and churches, anywhere that would have us, and we got to share it with a lot of people. But the story of Here We Come a Caroling is the story of these five women from across time and space who all happen to meet at the manger on the very first Christmas. And we use new arrangements of traditional Christmas carols to tell this story. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there are plays like The Vault, which is the story of two sisters and then two brothers who find themselves locked inside of a wine cellar. And while they're stuck inside of this wine cellar, they end up having a conversation because one sister has shown up to ask for money because her husband lost his job on a false accusation of sexual misconduct. And so, how does the one sister reconcile the fact that she knows that her husband loves her, but yet he still is facing an accusation of something that she couldn't imagine him doing? And then, for a third play, just to add to the variety, I was absolutely blessed with the opportunity to take a show to the Orlando International Fringe Festival a few years back, called You'll Figure It Out Eventually, which is a one person show about a playwright who forgot to write a play. And that was a play that happened when I had a 7 hour deadline to get a play into a competition. And I did not have any play finished. So I sat down and in 7 hours wrote this play that ended up one of the adjudicators for that competition messaged me privately and said, I'd like to license this show and take it to Orlando Fringe. And we were able to produce it there to some pretty good reviews from the Orlando Sentinel, which was a huge honor.
Congratulations to just writing it in 7 hours. It's impressive. What is the Fringe Festival for our audience that doesn't know?
Fringe is a specific type of theater that is more avant-garde, pushing the boundaries, experimental type theater. And the Orlando International Fringe Festival is one of the largest fringe festivals where there are um, a large number of plays. I believe it's somewhere between 50 and 100 plays that get produced over a 2 week span in Orlando. And they do it every May, and we were there in 2021.
What is the submission process? Do you have to, when you have to get it in, if you were, or have you gotten something in for this year?
This year, I've actually not submitted to Fringe Festival. My company, we're taking these 6 months from January until July to focus on our upcoming seasons, and to kind of select a pathway for our company. But the submission process for Orlando Fringe begins in Sep. I know it started for me in August, September, and it's a lottery system. So everyone submits and says, I'm going to put a deposit down. Then they draw out of a hat who gets what venue, because there are several different venues across the city of Orlando. And if you get chosen in the lottery, then you know where your show is going to be performed and how much set you're allowed to bring in. So for us, we were in the blue venue, which was a small black box that had audience on three sides of the stage, and our whole set that we were able to bring in was one chair. And so it's, how do you create a large production with as few resources as possible?
Very terrific. Who sponsors the Fringe Festival?
There are several different corporate sponsors, but the way that the Fringe Festival works is each artist pays for their own submission and for their own production, and Orlando Fringe itself takes a share of the ticket sales, but most of those proceeds go back to the artists themselves.
That's really nice. Until I was researching your background, I didn't really know Florida had a Fringe Festival. So good for Florida. How did you prepare to be an actor?
So it was something that was completely unintentional for me. When I was in elementary school, I was a very shy kid and I did not have very many friends at all. And so my mother put me into theater, and I did a production of Seussical because I thought if I was an actor, surely those are the coolest kids in school and I will have so many friends. And I fell in love with it. And so I was in theater all throughout school. When it came time to decide what I was going to do for college, I was recruited by Johns Hopkins and I was going to pursue law. And then I had this moment where all that I loved to do was theater. I love to write, I love to act, I love to sing. And it was kind of that calling of, if I'm going to do something for the rest of my life, I might as well enjoy it. So I've been studying theater ever since. And it's one of those things where the more that you write, the better you understand acting and all the other disciplines. But I've now studied every single discipline that I've had the chance to get my hands on in theater, including technical disciplines. And the acting is just doing and just.
How did you teach yourself to direct?
So that was a trial by fire. In fact, the first play that I ever produced was The Vault, which we produced for Florida Theater Conference in 2019. And we did a short tour, including some local theaters in my hometown and to some ITS, International Thespian Society competitions as well. And I had this play, and I told my high school director I would love to produce this. And she said, great, I don't have the time, so you're going to be in charge of directing and producing. And so I had to teach myself. And it was one of those things where I sat down with my notebook and I watched as many plays as I could find films of. And I took notes and I figured these stage pictures work, these stage pictures don't. And it became a lesson in how do I create a picture with just two people, and how do you communicate to. I learned a lot about communicating in metaphor because you have to tell your actors this is where we're going without telling them explicitly what to do, but letting them find it themselves.
Did you have them do a lot of walking around the stage?
A lot of walking, climbing on couches, sitting on top of the bar in that play. There's this really cool moment in The Vault, part one, which is the one act that we did, um, where the lights shut off. And so the entire theater is in darkness, and we use emergency lanterns to light the stage. So in this moment, we spent a lot of time figuring out how our actresses can safely walk around a pitch black stage with only emergency lights and then set up the lighting for the scene that they're going to need to perform the rest of the show without any of the theater lights on.
How much do you depend on lighting for mood?
In the modern theater, uh, very heavily. There's this idea in the early modern theater of and in ancient Greek and Roman theaters of universal lighting, where because they relied on the sun or they relied on candles, everyone was lit, including the audience. But now that we have this idea of the fourth wall, where only the stage is lit, we have to be creative with how we light the stage. And so as much as we can, I'll find there are moments in a play that I'm directing that just don't seem to sit right. And if I just change the lighting ever so slightly, all of a sudden everyone's connecting with it. Because we are very heavily impacted as an audience by light, especially since cinema's become as big as it has. If you watch a movie like La La Land, um, that movie is just a masterclass in color theory and in how the twilight purple that's used throughout that whole movie creates this sense of nostalgia for something that's occurring at the moment. And we have to do the same thing with The Vault. We had to darken the room and use this very harsh, very pale um, blue lighting that created this sense of foreignness in a familiar space, which is what we were getting to as they were starting to talk about things that were foreign to them that they didn't quite understand.
I notice that plays and musicals now are uh, using holograms and movies within the set, and anyway, technical additions. Are you tempted to try anything like that, or is that would that dilute from the story?
If we had the budget, I would go all out, absolutely. Because I believe that theater has always been an art of the people. You cannot produce theater if you don't have an audience, and the more people that come and see your show, the more successful the play is. And so we've certainly seen with producers like Cameron McIntosh, who always go all out with their special effects, it creates this sense of wonder and magic. Um, but I, as a director, tend to go more minimalist out of necessity. So the last show that we produced, our Here We Come a Caroling tour, that is an epic story. It takes place everywhere from a random snowy forest to the steps of the Sainte Chapelle in Paris to inns throughout Bethlehem and heaven itself. And we have all of these different spaces. And we had to make this with 5 chairs and a trunk. And our big special effect was that we had lights in the trunk that when they opened it, it was a glow that came up to their face. And certainly we've seen in plays like Our Town by Thornton Wilder, where if you take everything away and you give just precious little, the audience gets involved in making their own story. Um, and so while I think that there are certainly instances where too much spectacle can detract from the story, and we've seen that with mega musicals like Starlight Express, which was derided for being nothing but spectacle. Um, it can be a detraction from it, but I think that there are certain designers. The one who we study here at PBA is Robert Edmund Jones, who says that every element should tie into the script and tie into telling the story. So if we can get a spectacle in there that helps us tell our story, absolutely, we would love to have that ability.
Do you microphone the people? Do you mic the people acting?
Yes, we do, especially with our musicals because it's so hard to hear a modern voice over an orchestra. The discipline of operatic style singing that carries over an orchestra and writing even the underscore that doesn't take away from the voice has kind of fallen by the wayside in a lot of our modern shows. So we mic our actors and actresses so that our whole audience can hear them. Uh, and we get any equipment that we can to make that happen.
Do you have a lot to choose from when you're reviewing actresses and actors?
We are such a small company and such a startup that we're typically fairly limited. In fact, Here We Come a Caroling actually came out as a show because I had written this play called The Carol of the Bell, which is to date my favorite play I've ever written. I will produce it before I die, come hell or high water. But that's a show that requires a minimum of 12 people. And we only had 5 actresses come out. And so we couldn't have a Father Time or a Father Christmas that we needed for Carol of the Bell. And so uh, we had several weeks until the rehearsal process began. And I frantically started writing a show. And we went through 5 different pieces before eventually I had the idea for Here We Come a Caroling. And that piece, I had a week to write it, and so frantically wrote this piece. And uh, Mark Aliopoulos, who works with PBA as the associate dean of the music department, um, uh, he helped to write most of this music that we improvised off of chord charts and created this piece. It was really an organic process that was really neat.
Are there acting schools, directing schools, playwriting schools near you? How did you train yourself to do this kind of writing?
Currently, I am a theater student with Palm Beach Atlantic University, which is the absolute best theater department that I could find and that I could possibly hope for. What makes this school so wonderful is that they don't base anything off of your talent, but rather off of your work ethic. And you're trained in every single discipline of theater. I never thought that I would be hanging lights and doing electrical, but we're doing that. But as far as my playwriting training is concerned, I come from 3 generations of English teachers in my family. And I had an elementary school teacher, Mrs. McCoy, who there was one day I was in class and I was complaining to her that we had to write journals in first grade. And I said, I cannot stand this. And she said, why don't you write something fun like a play? And I said, no, writing a play certainly won't be fun, but she made me do it, and I ended up falling in love with it. And so,
In first grade?
in first grade, that's when I wrote my first play, and I've been writing ever since then. I've written about 50 different plays of varying lengths and varying levels of goodness, but my current publishing rep of plays that I would release to the public consists of, as I'm in the process of rewriting, it's between 12 and 15 pieces, full lengths and some shorter.
So impressive. I
Thank
mean,
you.
surprised so. But along with schoolwork and ordinary activities, that you're in there writing and writing under pressure. That's very impressive. Very impressive. So,
Thank you.
you have how many years left at the university?
I'm in the spring of my junior year right now, and so next year is my last year.
And do they have a graduate program you can participate in?
They do not for theater at PBA. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing next year. The goal is with Providence and with careful action from us, we'll be able to have Windmill set up as a company that we can pay ourselves from. To date, after taxes, I have made a total of $200 from my years of work with Windmill. Most of us are volunteering our time because we believe so strongly in this mission that we will do anything that it takes to create quality theater.
Yes, I'm thrilled to hear about the mission. Thrilled. And I particularly I have a bias towards new works because I think while we're all alive, you should try, whether if you're the writer or producer or customer or donor or whatever, just to give people with desire and talent a chance. And you don't know what's going to endure unless you produce it in first. So very interesting. What did you learn from 3 generations of English teachers? What did they emphasize with you?
One of the things that they emphasize is there is no excuse for bad grammar unless it's intentional. And the other thing that they strongly emphasize is you don't need to be angry to make a difference. Um, we live in the era right now, especially in theater, of the angry artist. And there's so much of a draw in new works theater for pieces of angst and anger and frustrations at the systems that exist in this country and around the world. And the art world has really been reeling ever since the atomic bomb was dropped. In the postmodern art world, we don't know how to capture destruction in our creations. But one of the things that these three generations of English teachers have taught me is that there is a discipline to finding joy and pursuing a very level approach. Think of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. He's saying very radical things, and he's in a situation where most men would lash out, but yet he pursues calmness and understanding. And that book has made more of an impact than most books have. And so there's really a discipline and a challenge to creating peace and order out of chaos. In fact, Richard Wilbur, who was a poet who wrote the lyrics for Candide by Leonard Bernstein, um, wrote in the final song of the show, "Let dreamers dream what worlds they please, those Edens can't be found. The sweetest flowers, the fairest trees are grown in solid ground. For we're neither pure, nor wise, nor good, but we'll do the best we know. We'll build our house and chop our wood and make our garden grow." And so I often try to just make the garden grow and to uh, build beautiful things out of earth that really might not want to give me beautiful things.
So we're out of time, and it's too bad because I'd like to wrap up with all the wonderful things you said, so I'm jumping on it. First of all, written theater and musicals to tell a story and not support some kind of political cause that might get dated over time. To be able and willing to try lots of different roles. Playwright talent from the early thing, but you've written a play under a 9 hours deadline. Directing because no one else was able to do it. There's so much animation. Your understanding that right now we live in a time that does not celebrate anything positive that I can see. But in any case, and to be that voice for the human experience is just really exciting. So thank you for being part of the Spark. You certainly are.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute honor.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.